Assalamu alaikum, hello and welcome. I'm Shazia, joining you on the Nutrition Show on Unity FM 93.5 FM. I'm really excited to have you all join me today for a discussion on topics related to nutrition, which I hope may support you, your families, and those that you influence with better health and well-being. So, as always, and before I get into the topic of the day, I want to remind listeners that all information shared on the show today is general in nature. For anyone with any medical issues or concerns, related or unrelated, please do seek advice from your own medical practitioner. Remember, that's what they're there for. They're there to advise you and to give you that advice that's specific to you. And the idea of the show, as always, is for me to try and highlight topics that I come across in my clinic, as well as in my reading, in my research, that I feel may be beneficial for you to know and learn about. And, being your own health advocate is just something so strong that I encourage everyone to do something, whether it's even just kind of picking up odd blogs to read to begin with, books, whatever it may be, join a club, whatever is accessible to you to get yourself on this learning journey, because it's the most powerful thing. Education is empowerment. I realized that when I returned to college to start learning about nutrition, and it's an ongoing thing. You'll never be at the stage that you want to be because you'll always be wanting to improve, which is amazing. So, starting somewhere is always key. So I'm glad to be back with you this week. I was kind of scratching my head about what to talk about, and there was a topic that I had been looking into as part of my own research, which I found incredibly interesting. And I thought to myself, shall I share this with my audience this week, or is it too technical? And I thought actually it's quite relevant, even though, for those of you who want to geek out on the topic, I'm sure you'll probably do that anyway. Some of you may be sort of quite well aware of it already, and some of you might be thinking, oh, why is she talking about this? And the truth is that actually it's really important, and I come across it with the clients that I see, and very common questions are really put to me related to this topic. So I'm going to try and break it down. I'm going to try and avoid the jargon, the technical terms, because that's unnecessary. Remember, my shows are kind of like more to kind of give you the information, but then give you some tips to take away, because the idea is that you're able to apply them straight away or as soon as possible, so that you can start benefiting yourself and your family. Of course, when you're making changes, it's always best to speak to your doctor first, because I don't know you, I can't advise you specifically, but these are things that you can look into. That's the idea. So you can look into these things, see how they could work for you and anyone that you kind of, have sort of authority over, so to speak. So today's topic then is a little bit complex, as I mentioned, and it's about looking at body clocks and how when these are misaligned, they can be potentially a reason for why we may suffer ill health consequences. And the idea is that once we know about these body clocks, we can utilize that information in trying to get us to a better place nutritionally. Remember, you can put really good food into your body, but if you're not correcting other things as well, you may not actually be achieving, that kind of benefit that you could otherwise be doing so. So that's kind of the idea of today's talk, really. I don't know whether you're kind of thinking about what do I mean by body clocks. I think a lot of you might be thinking, is she going to talk about menopause? So it's always related to women and the aging process. And that's what we do actually use as a figure of speech. We do talk about body clocks when it comes to women reaching the age of menopause or perimenopause, that kind of thing. But no, actually, I'm not talking about menopause today, although it's a very important topic. I'm actually talking about the body clocks that we all have, so men and women. And, these are clocks that are sort of, part and parcel of us in terms of our being and our behavior and our health outcomes. And they are fundamental when it comes to looking at the processes that are taking place in our body. And we see the importance of these body clocks when things start to go wrong. So, when I work with patients in clinic, this is something that I kind of discuss in a roundabout way. Although, I've never really mentioned any particular terms, because what I want to try and get my clients to do is to kind of see the benefits for themselves before getting into the jargon of things. So, depending on who the person is, I don't want to kind of, get them sort of stressed out because I'm talking about the technical side of things again, because at the end of the day, my job is to take the science and the research and break it down into topics and into explanations that can be understood by the general public. Because if I'm talking to you in jargon and I'm using technical words, which I've been used to for a while, having, worked in the pharmacy sector for such a long time, it doesn't really benefit the person that you're speaking to. So, that's where the challenge actually is, and that's where the beauty of it lies. So you understand something as a professional, and then you break it down into the concepts which can then be applied by the person who's listening or the person who is in the clinic with you at the time. So that's kind of why it's important for me to be able to do this. And the questions that I often get, or I often kind of perceive my clients to kind of be asking me, whether it's kind of phrased in different ways, what should we be doing? What should we be eating for optimal health, first of all? And that makes sense because that's what people are coming to me for. So, what kinds of foods should I be eating? And equally, what foods should I be avoiding? But then you've got the sub-questions that come under this kind of general question about basically, when should I be eating? Does it matter if I skip a meal? Should I combine my meals? Should I eat at a particular time? Should I be eating, the same every day, all the time, for the rest of my life? Does it kind of matter? So these questions are really, really relevant. Some people will want to know whether it's okay to eat in the middle of the night if they woke up, maybe they've not been able to get off to sleep, or, something's, keeping them awake at night, whatever it may be. So out of the stress, maybe out of boredom, maybe somebody who is perhaps doing shift work and sleeping during the day. We're going to talk a lot about this later on, but all of these questions are very pertinent. They're really important to address, and the point of today's show is then to kind of give you a kind of a general understanding on this, because this applies to each and every one of us. Not one of us is actually free of upsetting our body clocks in one way or another. I think we're all subject to this kind of imbalance, if you like. And, the idea is that once we know what the imbalances are, we can try and achieve some sort of, sense of normality and progression towards getting that health, in a better place. So I don't know, what are you thinking right now? Are you kind of relating to this? Are you kind of thinking, well, yeah, I have those questions as well. What do you think the answers are? Does it matter if we eat on an irregular basis? Or maybe, like me, I've been trying to work out what works for my body, and I know I'm not doing it quite right now because I'm going through a different sort of scenario in life at the moment. But what's working for you? I mean, I'm trying to kind of merge 3 meals into 2. And I found that didn't work for me so well. So I've had to go back to eating 3 times a day. But then I've got certain reasons why I kind of need to balance out 3 meals a day. But, that's not always the rule for everyone. And again, I'm going to talk about this a bit later on. But what are you doing? Are you eating 3 times a day? 5 times a day? Once a day? I mean, I've spoken to a couple of people recently, or known people who are just doing 1 meal a day, which is actually a way to eat. But then, are they eating the appropriate balance of proteins, fats, and carbs? What are they trying to achieve? Are they doing it because they simply don't have time to eat 3 times a day, or twice a day, or when they'd like to? How are they coping with that? So these are really, important questions to ask yourself. Do you snack? Do you eat late at night? Are you that nighttime eater? Do you have food on your bedside table? I know somebody who used to do that, wake up in the night and eat at night. So, these things are all kind of very relevant to this because, when you study and you look into what's actually going on as a consequence of eating in different ways, you'll see that, there is research to kind of associate, sort of look at imbalances in our health as a result of our behaviors and what we're being subject to. So it's really important to kind of have a general understanding. The summary of it all, if you're kind of like thinking, oh, I can't wait to the end of the show because Shaz is going to talk for an hour, and I get that, is that there isn't a one size fits all approach here. Every one of us is different. And, for my clients, I may vary the number of meals depending on what I see. And again, I'll talk about how I go about doing that. And, it's very experimental in some ways. However, there's a lot of data that we can also use to help support what we choose to do. And it's about looking at all the different factors in our life, which I'll talk about shortly too, to kind of come to some sort of kind of basis where you can say, yeah, I'm going to try this because I know that I've got these imbalances and I need to manage them. And I'm going to do that by eating like this many times a day, this many meals. We've talked about composition of meals before, so I'm not going to go into that now because that's a huge topic on its own. But there are lots of factors, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah, so it's not a case of looking at one or two things and making a decision. It's about looking at lots of different things, and these may include, as I've mentioned, where you're at in terms of your health. What are your circumstances, your social circumstances, your personal circumstances, the environment that you're in, what's going on with your life on a general level, your stress levels, any medical history, any sort of medicines that you're taking. I mean, I used to look at that before anyway, but again, it's something that I take into account when I work as a nutritional therapist as well. What the person's mindset is, how are they feeling in themselves, their behavior. Are they copying someone? Are they following somebody famous maybe? Are they trying to achieve a goal? Someone, say, for example, is planning a wedding. She's going to want to be, wanting to fit into her wedding dress. So all these kinds of things may affect how we're eating, and that's another factor that affects our biological clocks. So of course, the list is not exhaustive, as I've mentioned, and in addition to all of these things, which I will look at when I'm onboarding a client, we also have access to testing, whether that's GP testing and results from the GP, but also private testing as well, so functional testing, where we can look at different markers like stress, like genetic makeup, like any. The great thing with the genetics is that we can see if there are any. Without going into the technicality, we can look at whether or not particular genes are or enzyme systems aren't working so well, which may kind of lead you down another path of health related issues. So we can look at a whole range of tools and data and information that can help us when making plans that suit the individual in a more specific way. So, it's a really nice way for us to work as nutritional therapists because it allows us to do that. And this will help me form that, that advice that I kind of put together for the plan that goes to that client. Okay, so before I sort of go into more details, I just want to make sure that anyone who's listening to the show realizes that this information is only general in nature. It's not constituting medical advice in any way. I don't know you. I don't know what will be safe for you. I'm just trying to educate and bring to my audience, people who are listening, information that I feel may be of benefit to you because, I see this in clinic. I see this when I'm talking to people generally. We see it in the research. practitioners are talking about these things, they're writing about these things. So these are really pertinent issues. They're things that we need to really take on board and start looking at what we can do in terms of making general changes. And then obviously, if you need that specific help, seek out an appropriately qualified, registered practitioner who will work with you specifically and make those recommendations more specific to you. Okay, so just to throw that in there. So going back to these body clocks, and so what is it that I'm actually referring to when I'm talking about body clocks? You're probably thinking, well, she's gone on about how there's lots of factors that can make a difference and why it's an issue, etc. And I hear you. And so I want to just touch very briefly on what I mean when I'm talking about body clocks. So again, just for those of you who might have missed the first few minutes of the show, I'm not talking about menopause or female health as her reproductive years come to an end. I'm talking more about body clocks in terms of the human race, the human body in and of itself. And some of the terms I will use so that you can look into things should you choose to do so. You want to geek out on the information that's out there, feel free to, and I would always recommend that depending on how far you want to take this. So most of us, if not all of us or a lot of us, may have heard of the term circadian rhythm. So if you look up the definition for circadian, rhythm meaning a certain pattern, circadian meaning being, having, characterized by, or occurring in approximately 24-hour periods or cycles as of biological activity or function. So it's telling you about something that happens every 24 hours. So this is what we're talking about when we're talking about a clock. Makes sense? Clock, 24 hours, right? So, you can see the association there. So it's something that happens every day. It's happening in our bodies. It's about all the processes, the hundreds and millions of reactions that are happening. So it's about what's governing or controlling or modifying or being affected by all the things that are happening on the outside as well as the inside, and how these are then going on to affect health downstream. So what we have is the circadian timing. Consists of two parts. There's the central the brain clock. So in our brain we've got a particular center, an area of the brain that controls this part of the kind of the 24-hour rhythm, if you like. And then we've got several clocks which are located outside of the brain, and we call these peripheral clocks. Okay, so these may be tissues and organ systems that are away from the brain. So we've got the central clock and then we've got the peripheral clock. So these are the two that are working together to help coordinate, to help sort of manage and modify and work together to make sure all the processes in our body are happening in a way that is actually going to benefit our health. Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about what I mean about that in a moment. But basically, think of these two control centers. You've got the central control center, and then you've got the ones that are kind of the remote, the sort of satellite, if you like, sites where you've got control coming in at that end as well. And it's these two combined that are setting this 24-hour period cycles, and they're kind of supporting us in terms of making sure everything is kind of working okay. So why is this? What do they do? Why are they important? So the central clock will control things like the food that we're consuming. It's got a very important role in the sensitization of body tissues to insulin. I'm going to talk about that in a moment. And it also controls the usage of energy. So these are three examples of what the central clock does. Now, insulin, you should remember, if you've been listening to me on my previous shows, is the hormone that controls blood sugar. So when we consume meals which have got sugars in them, glucose, so these may be starches, they may come from fruit and veg, so your breads and things like that. Insulin is the hormone that is released when that sugar is broken down and absorbed at the level of the gut, the small intestine. And insulin has a very important role in ensuring that our blood levels of sugar are kept within a very controlled range, because blood sugar out of control, as you know, diabetes being a very common one, can be problematic. So insulin being functional in an effective way is key to preventing these kinds of sugar imbalance conditions. And I talk about blood sugar balance quite frequently, not just on my shows on radio, but when I talk to my clients in the education, in workshops, in Q&As, whatever I've done. It's always been a very common area of kind of discussion because it's so important. It's so important. I think I have the discussion almost every day at home. It's just one of those things I just can't escape. And I think the more we understand it, the more we apply it, the more we can actually benefit from, really grasping that understanding of balancing our blood sugar. If we're spiking our insulin levels all day long, every day, several times a day, we are going to end up in a lot of difficulties when it comes to managing good health on a longer term basis. So that's what the central clock can be involved in. So then these actions are then further modified by the peripheral clocks. So these are the clocks outside of the brain, as I mentioned. And these examples can include your muscles. The gut is an example as well. So remember, the gut is regulating absorption of nutrients, fats, proteins, and glucose, as I've just mentioned. Fatty tissue is another example, and even the liver. So these are major areas of the body which are having some control on a peripheral clock level, and even the pancreas. So the pancreas is where insulin is released from. So these are all really good examples and good areas to kind of focus on when it comes to managing, our kind of body clocks when they go wrong. We need to look at all of these different areas, and again, there will be more as research kind of evolves, and it's good to kind of see how each of these will influence our body clocks to kind of help us to get on that journey to good health. So body clocks, when they're working well, amazing. We've got our health working for us rather than against us. And it's when they start to kind of miscommunicate and become imbalanced that we start to see health-related concerns. And we see this in clinic, as practitioners. I saw it as a pharmacist. I'm seeing it now as a nutritional therapist. These are just, like I said, none of us are escaping the consequences of misalignment. It's just so common, and this is where the education is really important. So I talked about insulin sensitivity. I've talked about it already, but think about when your insulin isn't responding in the same way because there's a problem at the tissue level or the receptor level. So that communication between the insulin hormone and its kind of target sites, that communication breaks down. This is where we start to see problems: pre-diabetes, diabetes, even the Alzheimer's, dementias. These are all conditions that we can relate to blood sugar imbalance. So you can start to see how imperative it is that we have a good understanding of why these issues are really important to kind of understand and apply in our lives. So if you want to look into this more, circadian rhythm is a good place to start. We're looking at chronobiology. So it's quite a fascinating area. I'm diving into it now to get some more understanding on it because I want to use it more in my clinics. And I think, it would serve us quite a lot if we grasp the general principles at least, and then put those into practice into our lives. And as I said, we can always do our general reading, and if you want to get more specific, then work with a practitioner because they will help guide you to something that's specific for you. So what can upset these body clocks? So I've mentioned some things already. Blood sugar imbalance is one. So if you're, goes to say then that the way we eat is going to be a potential issue, particularly if you're eating carbs all day long, if you're not kind of focusing on that protein and fat, as I talk about time and time again. This is going to set your blood sugar levels to rise. Your insulin's going to have to kind of face this challenge that you're setting to your body each and every time. Think about your meals. You want to sort of get that into a good place, because you can do a lot of good for yourself just by balancing blood sugar levels. Okay, so food in terms of what we're eating is one one thing. Um, Other things that are very, very common, and I'm actually guilty of this myself, is exposure to artificial light. Okay, so what do I mean by this? So are you on your phone before you go to bed at night? The last minute before you put your head on that pillow, you're on your phone. Okay, I am guilty of it. So I'm not here to tell you off because I'm in the same place. But that blue light exposure, it's causing a lot of problems for people. It's causing issues with our sleep. It's causing issues with our health in other ways. If you're working that late, you're on a PC, again, blue light exposure. The lighting that we have in our homes nowadays, is it the best when it comes to our health? We might be getting really good light sort of in the rooms that we're in, but is that what we want to be exposing ourselves to? I mean, if you think about, hundreds of years ago, people used to wake when the sun was out and they used to go to bed when it was dark. I know we can't do this in our modern day and age, but it would be so lovely to be able to actually experience that as close as possible. So, look at the ways that you can actually try and mimic the kind of natural light that we have. I mean, everywhere when you kind of look into this kind of aspect of health, you'll read about getting sunlight exposure when you wake in the day. You want to get that sunlight exposure. It helps to modulate sleep quality and sets that cycle for sleep. It's absolutely essential, and I know the difference because I've tried it on myself. We want to minimize this artificial light exposure as much as we can. And, I mean, in some sources, you'll read that up to 2 hours before you go to bed, you should be off your screens. And I know that, again, this is not always possible, but think about how you can minimize. If you can't cut it out, minimize it. Find something that works for you and apply that. So a lot of people will use blue blocking glasses, if they're working and they're having to write reports or they're having to work late into the night. So, look into things like that if you have to. But try and synchronize your body with nature as much as you can, because that's kind of how we're designed to be. That's how we're going to focus on being the best that we can. Disturbed sleep is another one. This is something that many of us are also experiencing. So if you're, sleeping in a room that's not completely black, it's not completely dark. Maybe the temperature's not the right temperature. Maybe there's noise. Maybe there's street lighting that's coming into your room. I have that problem in my bedroom. My bedroom window is next to a street light, and wow, I don't even have to put the light on. There's so much light in my room. So we only moved recently, so I haven't had the chance to kind of change the blinds, but that's something for me to do, or to look at other ways to get my room dark enough for me to get to sleep. But disturbed sleep is another one. For those of you who work at night and sleep during the day, so shift workers, this is a big one for you. Obviously, we need to work. We need to kind of do things that we need to do because, we are in a difficult time. But this is something that can be one that can affect those people particularly. So again, see what you can do within your circumstances to try and minimize the disturbance to your circadian rhythm. Obviously, things will never be perfect, but it's something that I want to point out because there are many people who are doing night shifts easily as part of their role. And then, as I mentioned, eating, but then also eating all day, every day, snacking, meals, etc. So I'm going to talk about this after the break, but that's something that we're going to look at because obviously that's kind of a key way that we can start to modify things. A little bit easier than the other things, but that's another factor. And then just to kind of touch on, and this is a bit more technical, but even the genes that we have, so this is our DNA, the genes that we have that will code for those clocks or code for the processes that are involved in those clocks. And if they're kind of not working to their optimal, so I don't need to go into the jargon, but if they're not working specifically as we need them to be, that could also be one component of why our circadian rhythms, our body clocks may be off line. Okay, so there's a lot there already, and you're probably thinking, wow, this is quite complicated, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep it very simple, and I'm going to try and sort of give you some things that you can start looking at straight away, because I think that's going to be the best way that we can kind of utilize this information. But when you start to look at the research, you'll find a lot more. So start somewhere. I always say start where you're at and build, because there's no point me telling you to do things if you're finding that you're getting overwhelmed, because that's not the idea of me sort of helping my clients or speaking to an audience when it comes to topics that are, nutrition based. It's about bringing that information to you in a way that you can understand and apply. And if you're feeling overwhelmed, break it down. Do something that's small, but make it something that's regular. Small but consistent. That's always the way I feel is the best approach, because it is overwhelming, and even I sometimes have to take steps back before I can take steps forward. So it's something that we need to work on, and we're all different. We've all got different characters. We're all different personalities. We've all got different patience levels, and there's no no one's perfect. We've all got our kind of difficulties to deal with, our circumstances. So work on something when you find something that you can use as a starting point, and then build. Okay, so I've talked quite a lot, and this has gone on for quite a while, so I'm going to give you a break. Please stay tuned, as I will be diving into more after the short break. So you're listening to me, Shazia, on the Nutrition Show on Unity FM 93.5 FM. Back with you shortly. Assalamu alaikum, and welcome back to the Nutrition Show. You're joining me, Shazia, on Unity FM 93.5 FM. So before the break, I was talking about body clocks and the importance that they have in terms of what they actually do. So I gave you some examples. Remember, there were two lots. There was the central body clock and the peripheral body clocks, which work together to manage all the processes that are going on in our body. And the idea is that there's quite a complexity in terms of their kind of function and their kind of ability to support us in achieving better health. And it's when these start to go wrong that we actually appreciate that, they are there to be supporting us, and that we're not really perhaps supporting ourselves so that they can do the job as best as they can. So I talked about circadian rhythm, and I talked about how, there's several factors. Didn't talk about everything, obviously. The hour's not going to permit me to do that. But just factors that you can start looking into to help serve yourself in terms of getting yourself to a better place in terms of your own body and your own health. So just to kind of highlight that this discussion today is educational in its purpose. It's not for me to be giving you medical advice. I'm not a medical advisor. I am a nutritionist, and I worked as a pharmacist for many years. But the idea is that, you always get your health kind of information first and foremost from your medical practitioner, because that's what they're there for. So we want to make sure that you're in the best hands to begin with. And then you can obviously add in other therapies, other sort of advice on top of that. So you get like a complete package. So please be aware that that's what this is for. Obviously, if you're concerned, if you're worried, please seek out medical advice. Your own medical practitioner will be able to support you and guide you. That's what they're there for. Okay, so please reach out. Okay, so I said prior to the break that I'm only going to focus on a couple of things, a couple of areas that you can start to look at. Obviously, there are a lot more, but the idea is that you start to appreciate that these are things that are going to actually make a difference to your health. And these are questions that a lot of people will have, no doubt about it. Whether, you're someone who prepares meals for others, whether it's just for your own health, whether you're, you're seeing this in family and friends, whether you're kind of supporting someone who's not well, who's kind of going through a medical problem or whatever it may be, you're going to see the effects of this, the consequences of these things, because it's like I said, there's no one of us that is kind of free from these kinds of imbalances. So the first thing I want to try and address is the question of how many times we eat and whether snacking is a good idea or a bad idea. So the two things I'm going to kind of address in one kind of segment. So a really good question. And, looking at all the different kind of areas of research that look at whether or not eating X number of meals a day is better to eating Y number of meals a day, it's actually quite complex. And, when I was at college, the advice generally, and I think has been the advice for some time in the nutritional world, is to eat 3 balanced meals a day. Okay, so that is the advice, and then 2 snacks in between. Okay, now this advice has been changing, it's been altered, it's been updated, and to be honest with you, even though that can still apply and work really well for some, for others, it may not be the way to go. So again, going back to whether or not there's an easy answer to all of this, the answer is no, unfortunately there is not, because you have to listen to your body. Your body will tell you, like your body tells you when you're sick, it's telling you that something is wrong. It's wanting you to do something to try and rectify what's gone wrong, what's out of balance, so that you can get back to working the way you should be. Your body is actually a miracle. It's a miracle creation. It's kind of advising you. The sensors are going off, the alarms are going off when you're unwell. Likewise, when you're not, you're not sleeping well, or whatever it might be, or you're at the stages of being diagnosed with something. That's your body telling you that something or some things are off balance. So we have to kind of listen to our body and work with it. So this 3 meals a day and 2 snacks advice does not work for everyone, but it can work for some. Okay. The idea is, though, we need to kind of ensure, and this is going back to my previous kind of discussion in the first part of the show, about when you do eat, that you're eating a balanced meal. I've talked about the plate before. And then you're focusing on ensuring that you're getting quality proteins and fats at each meal, because we want to ensure that blood sugar remains balanced. So what can we do then to ensure that we're supporting our circadian rhythms? So as I say, the 3 meals a day is a very general recommendation, and that may not work for everyone. We need to ensure that our insulin is being managed appropriately. We don't want to get ourselves into an insulin resistant state. So we don't want to become insulin resistant. We don't want to develop those conditions that may come as a result of us not looking after our blood sugar levels. We want insulin to be our best friend. That's what we want to do. We want to be able to measure, and it's something that actually isn't done so often, but we will do it, and I will do it in my clinic if I was working with someone to look at their blood sugar imbalance, if that was a concern that I had. It's a very good marker to look at the insulin levels, because what we want to try and do is keep ourselves in an insulin sensitive state on a long-term basis. And this is what's going to help our circadian rhythms. If we're not spiking our blood sugars and going through this roller coaster because we're eating carbohydrate rich foods and then not combining these appropriately with fats and proteins, then this is going to be a real problem. Okay, so our insulin has to be our friend, not our foe. Okay, we need to work and support our insulin. And then remember, every time you're having a meal, your insulin is going to rise. That sugar level is going to cause insulin levels to rise and spike, and then the idea is then to bring that blood sugar level down to the range that is acceptable. And the more times you're eating, then, so if you're eating 3 meals and 2 snacks, for example, you can consider that that could be potentially the number of times you're spiking your insulin throughout the day. And if you think of this on a longer term basis, what is it doing for our health? Is it having a positive influence, or is it having a negative influence? I mean, many people will be monitoring their blood sugar levels, particularly if they're thought to be at high risk of developing diabetes, for example. and they will see this. They will be able to see a snapshot of this if it's a finger prick blood test. But if you're doing the continuous blood glucose monitoring, which is excellent, and something I would advise my clients, then you can see what foods are spiking your blood sugar levels. You can see what's working for your body. Not everyone will be suited to a particular source of protein or fat or sugars, carbohydrates. So you can see what is actually happening, to your blood sugar levels when you're consuming certain foods. It's a very useful tool to have with you if you're finding that this is a particular problem for you, despite the fact that you're trying to eat the protein and fats at every meal. Okay, so this is something that you can do. Now, as I mentioned, some people may do really well on a single meal a day. But if you are doing that for whatever reason, maybe you're working with a practitioner, or you've always done that and it works well for you, you need to ensure that you're getting the appropriate amount of nutrition every day in that one meal a day. Okay, so it's not just about consuming anything at that one meal. It's about making sure that it's appropriately planned, and that it's giving you the appropriate nutrition for your body's needs. And again, your body will tell you if that's working for you or not. If you are going to snack, again, think about the blood sugar balance. Don't just go and get yourself, a fizzy drink, or a candy bar or something, or something that's going to spike your blood sugar levels again. Like, that's just rich in carbs. You don't want to do that. Again, think about the rule about supporting your insulin. Get those fats and proteins in at the same time. Yeah, you don't want to go for unhealthy snacks. There are many of those. I've seen it. I've seen what people do for snacks. Think about opting for healthier snacks if you are going to snack, or you've been advised to snack because of your particular situation, or the particular conditions you may have. And there are people who do need to snack for various reasons. I mean, there are special groups. There are people with particular medical diagnoses. It's unique to that individual. A lot of things that we kind of may overlook also is whether or not we're kind of spacing our meals appropriately. So what's the timing? So we've talked about how many meals. What are we actually kind of looking at in terms of the timing now? So I've been guilty of it myself because, and I'll do it because maybe I'm bored, maybe I'm stressed out, maybe I'm rushed for time, whatever it might be. We're all busy people, and I know a lot of you out there are going to be resonating with this because our lives are just getting more and more stressful, if anything else. So the timing of meals is another one that can really affect our biological clocks, and it's a good one to look at, and it's a good one to build a routine around because when you have an appointment, you stick to the appointment, don't you? So if you've got an appointment with your doctor at 3 o'clock in the day, you're not going to turn up at 5 o'clock, are you? If you need to be, you've got to pick up your little one from nursery at 12 o'clock because they're doing half a day. You're not going to turn up at 11 o'clock or at 1 o'clock. Likewise, we've got clocks internally, like we've got clocks externally in our social lives. And so it goes without saying, therefore, that timing is also important. And, whatever that first meal of the day for you is, again, I don't agree with the fact that your first meal needs to be at the time you wake up, although for some people that does work. For some people, delaying that first meal is actually very beneficial. So this is where we talk about time-restricted feeding and we talk about intermittent fasting. Really worthwhile looking into these concepts if you've not looked at them before, because there's a huge amount of benefit to be had for many of us with just applying these principles. So, delaying that first meal for as long as possible. So if you're used to having breakfast at 8, but you're working from home, say, for example, and you can have breakfast maybe at 11, might work for you really well. And the reason being is that you're prolonging the overnight fast that you would have done, providing you haven't been eating at night, obviously. This is kind of talking about a regular situation when you've gone to sleep, you've not got up in the night, and you've got up in the morning as normal, and you can delay that breakfast. Again, not for everyone, but it could work for some. So for some people, they'll have the first meal of the day at lunchtime. So when I talk about lunchtime, I'm talking about 12, maybe 1 o'clock. So that's their first meal. So you could even consider that their breakfast or even brunch, whatever you want to call it. And they make that meal the biggest meal of the day. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a moment, but they make that their biggest meal of the day, and that meal is planned so well that it's going to give them appropriate nutrition, having undergone an overnight fast. So the idea is that you nourish your body after you've been through an overnight fast, not had anything to eat. Perhaps you've had some water, that's fine, but you've not spiked your insulin over that period of time, and now it's ready. And it's time for you to provide your body with the nutrition that it will really need. Okay, so if you're you know if you're doing that and it's not causing you harm, or you're doing that under the advice of a practitioner, that's a really good way to kind of balance the way your body will function. Not everyone is at that stage. Not everyone can do that. Everyone's at a different metabolic stage, so I wouldn't recommend this for everyone. For some of us, we're better than others, and that could work really well. Again, work with a practitioner to guide you, but that's something that can be done. Obviously, if that can't be done, eat your breakfast when you rise in the morning. Make sure it's balanced. Think about the proteins and fats, as I've said before, because you don't want to add to any metabolic issues you've got. You don't want to add to any more circadian misinformation, misalignment, imbalance that may already exist. Okay, so think about that as an initial thing, and remember, your body is resting and repairing at night. You don't want to be eating if you want to rest and repair. You've got to do one thing or the other. The body cannot digest and rest at the same time. It's got to be doing one thing or the other. So if you're consistently putting in nutrients into your body, it cannot be resting, repairing, clearing. That those housekeeping functions cannot be working. So think about the timing. So if you're constantly eating, as in sort of the number of times you're eating, and then you're changing maybe the timings of meals in terms of routine, these may upset that circadian rhythm. So think about routine. Think about how you can time your meals such that they can fit in with your circumstances, but also work well for your body. So when it comes to timing of meals, the other thing that is really important that I have to consider when I'm writing plans is someone's social circumstances. So are you looking after a family, young children? Is your spouse working later than you? Do you like to have meals together as a family? I did mention this in one of my previous talks because it's so powerful to sit and have a meal together. So yesterday, it was so lovely for us. I really felt blessed, actually, and God bless all families to be able to do this. But my brothers were over, my sister was around as well with my mum, and we all had dinner together, which we haven't done in such a long time, that actually I didn't want the evening to end. I just felt so connected and I felt so blessed. And it's so essential that we connect with the ones that we're, who are so important, our loved ones who are so important in our lives. So it kind of clashes with advice that we may otherwise give as nutritional therapists, because we're like, eat at this time, don't eat after that time, do this, do that, do that. We have to really balance that. And I think it's so important to kind of, work around the advice sometimes that we have and talk to the person you're working with, because if you're eating at 5 o'clock because you're determined to give yourself a really clean break overnight, your spouse might be working away and I don't know, coming home at 7 p.m., 8 p.m., 9 p.m. Some people work way later, and then they may want to have their dinner at that time, whereas you've already eaten. Do you wait for your spouse because you want that connection and that quality time together? Or do you eat because you're working with your body and you're trying to get to a better state of nutrition because it's working for you? So it's a really tricky one. And like I said, I really enjoyed our family time yesterday, which, is so rare now, because we're living such busy lives, and it's kind of that connection is just so, its weight is worth more than gold, I think, and I really miss it. And I don't know if you can tell, I'm probably getting a bit emotional, but you really do need to kind of find something that works in between all of that, and you want to kind of make sure that you're connecting all the things that are going to help support you, because even stress is going to have its impact on lots of body systems and throw things out. So you want to kind of really make it an enjoyable experience whilst you're trying to find what works best for you and your body. So, timing of meals, this is another thing that I've thrown in there. Not a nutritional one, so to speak, but it's a really important one. So, work your way around these kinds of complications, because they do matter. They do matter. I mean, I was working with a client who was saying, I could do this, but what do I do with my children? What do I do with my husband? And these are such important questions, and particularly when you're not in that circumstance yourself, you might easily just forget that these are things that we need to consider. But it's something that we do need to give attention to and build into the plan. And this is kind of where the challenge is then kind of apparent with the nutritional therapist. And there are ways and means. There are lots of things that you can do and make the most of it. And more often than not, it's going to be a compromise. It's going to be a compromise. It's going to be something, that's going to be something that you need to work with. So, eating late at night, which is the other thing that, people might want to know or ask about, on the kind of the flip side of the coin. We're not really meant to be eating at night because, as I mentioned, the night is for sleep and rest, from a nutritional perspective, from a health perspective. And so if we're feeding our bodies when we're supposed to be resting, not digesting, clearing, repairing, we're supposed to be in a state of cleanse overnight. So if we're eating late at night, when is our body going to be undertaking these housekeeping activities? As I mentioned, think about, an office block where the office workers have gone home and every bin in every office is full. If the cleaner doesn't come in overnight or later when everyone's gone home to empty those bins and clean up, there's going to be a messy office to come back to the day after. So, we need these housekeeping activities. Our bodies are far more complex. It's much more, complicated than that. But, to give you an analogy, you could think of it like that, So ideally, no, eating late at night isn't the way to go. But again, depending on your personal circumstance, your issues in terms of medical health, your social circumstances, this could be something that may need to be factored in. But again, think about what you're doing to your digestive system and those biological clocks. If they're disrupted, they can be problematic. And, this is something that we kind of really do want to take on board, because it is about trying to make sure that we're working with our bodies and working in a way that's going to be conducive to good health. We don't want to be sort of putting ourselves at risk of developing chronic health conditions. So we need to manage the imbalances now. It's not about waiting for tomorrow. It's about looking at things now and starting to build them in. Work slowly, take small steps. If you go back, don't worry about it. Pick yourself up, move forward again. And it's about ensuring that we look after those around us as well, because, everyone's going to have their own personal circumstances. And especially when you've got children, I'm sure you're going to be, looking at meal times, focusing on their nutrition as well. So we want to work around all the different factors that may be. So lastly, just to finish off then, how big should these meals be? Should they be the same size? If you are eating 3, for example, should they vary in size? What's the kind of the logic and the understanding on this? Again, no one size fits everyone, because I've seen variance in what people want to do. Some people say, if I'm having a breakfast, it's got to be a small one because I don't feel hungry at that time of the day. or they'll have a smaller breakfast because they simply haven't got time to eat more. Whatever it may be, or they might have a large meal at night because that's the only time they can eat because they've had such a hectic day, or maybe they have quite a lot of time during lunch and maybe that's kind of when they want to eat. So it can vary from person to person personally, but even on a nutritional level, this can be something that really does need to be looked into. And again, your body will tell you whether or not that's the kind of way to go. And then we use the tools, as I mentioned before, to kind of work on a plan that's going to work you to the best that you can be. So we've all heard about breakfast being the most important meal of the day, not skipping it. And there are studies out there that show this. So, and for me, that is true for my personal body. I find that if I skip breakfast, I do have a bad day. And and what we need to think about is, what is our body doing at that time of day? Is it active? Is it trying? Are we best at our thinking? Are we alert? Are we ready to go? Those are the early hours of the day. Yeah, we're not like that at the end of the day, and we shouldn't be. We should be winding down. So if you think of it from a logical perspective, we should have the largest meal at the beginning of the day and then make these smaller as we progress through the day. So that's kind of a general understanding. And actually for many people that does work. For me, it works really well personally. So, I have tried it and it does work really well. But again, it doesn't have to be your way to go, but it's something that you can look into. Thinking about, a size as well. Again, you need to think about what you're putting into your meals. It's not just having a big meal that's all just carbs based, or there's no fibers in them. You want to kind of balance out those meals regardless of the size. So if you're having smaller portions, say for example at the end of the night, again you want to be incorporating proteins and fats into your meal to ensure that there's blood sugar balance over the period of the night. I think that's kind of a lot said about the food aspect. Like I said, there's so much more. There's all those things about managing your light exposure, managing your routine from different perspectives in terms of stress as well, from managing things like your routine in terms of what you're doing during the day. Whether you're a shift worker, are you sleeping during the day? Are you getting the rest that you need? All these things are other areas that we also need to look at. Food is only one aspect of ensuring that we have a healthy life and state of being, because like I said before, you could eat all the good food in the world, but if you're not doing everything else, like the stress management, the lifestyle changes, adequate sleep, fixing your relationships. I mean, in our faith from Islam, we know we have to fix our relationships. Don't hold grudges. Don't, forget to speak to your brother or your sister, after 3 days have passed. This is sinful. We want to try and make sure that we incorporate all these beautiful lessons we have from our faith. It works so well with the nutritional, field. I always found that my values were always aligned when I studied nutrition because of these things. Fix these things. Stress sets our blood sugar balance all over the place. So whether you're stressed because your relationships are in a mess, please allocate time to sorting out relationships. It's a big one that we see a problem with. Your health is not going to fix by eating organic, pasture raised, free range, chemical free foods if your relationships are in a mess. If you're stressed out all the time, you're not sleeping, you're not looking after your body in from the physical perspective as much as you can and within your means. You got to sort all of these other things out. Again, don't be overwhelmed. I'm just saying that these issues are there. They can also offset the circadian clocks. Try to work on each of these in turn and work with someone. If you're struggling, reach out. Remember, you're not on your own. And this is not medical advice. This is just coming from me from a general perspective, because I see this. I see this in clinic. I see this in everyday life. I see this when I speak to people, when I tell them about what I do. It's there. We're not going to be able to hide away from it. We need to deal with it, and we can do that in baby steps. It doesn't have to be something that you have to take on all on your own and all in one go. So I'm going to stop there. There's a lot there. I do like to talk, as you know. I'm just so passionate about this area of health, and my intention is to get the information out there to people. Please share my work. Please learn from the things I kind of highlight. if you can teach me, I'm ready to hear. This is always a two-way process. Ring in with your feedback. If there's topics that you want me to look into and discuss, I'd love to hear from you. Helps me kind of plan the next show. So it's really, really, helpful for me too. So I hope what you've heard today has been supportful and useful to you. And I hope that you can incorporate some of the things I've talked about and, always seek medical advice first. Yeah, so always go and see your GP, speak to them, get the advice that you need, and then speak to a nutritional therapist if you need that extra support. We're always there to help and support and tailor the general advice for you specifically. Any thoughts, feedback is always greatly appreciated and received. I'm grateful for another opportunity to connect with you. So this is Shazia on the Nutrition Show on Unity FM, 93.5 FM. I look forward to joining you again soon. Take care until next time. Wassalamu alaikum.